Vielen Dank, dass ihr noch geblieben seid zur Fragerunde. Q, question, A, answer. I'll switch to English. Thank you so much for 1 week of work, actually. Below in Spitze. And for the 2 concerts, tonight and tomorrow. I think, does anybody of you have some questions? Just answers. You have just answers. I've come to the right place. But I've seen some people here who have some questions, and I don't know whether all questions have been asked and answered at the bar, or whether there are still some questions. So who wants to start with questions? I'll grab a microphone.
So I have the question, why in our culture we come from questioning some phenomena like music, as tonight, from a point of view where body plays such a big role, but it does not, it is sort of excluded in the questioning territory. So it's very obvious that all the musicians, all the people who make art have so much to do with the body, and language is just not possible if not some bodily things do happen. So if you come from anthropology, you have to do with people from other places, and they have totally different reference to their body, and so that was left out. Sorry, my question.
Can I answer? Yeah. I think it's a really interesting question, and I want to, at some point, pass it on to the musicians. But I myself have learned that I can listen better through certain types of movement as well. So it's not only paying attention to the presence of the body. So, for example, we've talked quite a bit about like how in theatre, when you've played with theatre groups, right, they expect certain bodily movements. But I'll shut up and let the musicians talk about their own bodies. But I myself pay attention better through a certain personal, like.
Who wants to talk about
So the question is
his
about
or her body?
musicians, right? What part does your body play in your work?
Why in that debate? Why the body is left out in the questioning from the different attitudes, like from anthropology or from the point of view in philosophy of ethics, and there is coming even the question of politics, but never the body. And that's very typical for the European, not all the European, because I'm half Greek, and so I have some sensibility to that. But yeah, it is so obvious.
Yeah, I think, well, perhaps we should apologize that maybe our outro was too rushed or too short, because really the body is something that is really at the center of what we're looking at. When I focus on language, I have a very strong interest in language, but for me, language is definitely not just the words. Language is not a disembodied phenomena. Language is something which is very gestural, it's very expressive. What the musicians are doing here is inseparable from their bodies. Like, if making music is language, and we can talk about that, and I would argue that it is, then it is the body speaking. And I would go even further to say the technology that they're using is part of their body. We've been speaking all week about the skills and the habits that they've developed in learning these instruments over decades, and the familiarity they have. For example, pick on Martin, he's an amazing setup here of guitar pedals, different loops, different effects. it looks extremely technical, and for you or me to look at it, we could spend just an hour trying to work out what each button means. And when Martin's working there, his hand is instantly moving. Like he's speaking with his hand, he's speaking with his guitar and with the effects and with the pedals and the knobs. And so the body is central to that, and the way that a feeling or an emotion or a desire is felt and expressed, this is one fluid movement. So when I'm talking about language, I'm really talking about this kind of fluid expression, which is completely embodied, and it's something which, we, in order to do fluently, is something that we take into our bodies and enact through that. This is what I'm seeing, and perhaps one of the musicians, I don't know how you've experienced this. Sure.
To be honest, personally, when it comes to me, I don't think that the body is anything that's up for discussion, up for artistic discussion. It's just a tool, yeah, that's being, a lot of the sounds could be generated otherwise, and it would be just the same. I think that the body is highly overrated, and I see like discussions about bodies so much in all disciplines. I'm actually very thankful when I don't have to talk about bodies, and I'm also very happy that music you can be very happy listening to even without seeing musicians. I think that's great. Yeah. So. Personally, I cannot say, from my point of view, I don't have any special interest in bodies when I do this type of art. I work a lot with, or used to work a lot in dance contexts and performance contexts, and that's a completely different issue. But for what we do here, the body is not of any artistic relevance or importance. Sure, I have to feel good in order to play good, but it's a very basic thing. Everybody has to feel good to do what he or she does. Yeah, but when it comes to discussions, we talk about a lot of things, but at least me, I never talk about body or physical things. I think they're, when it comes to music, distracting. Just my personal experience or interests.
Next question. Oh, no questions? It's not possible. Ah, okay.
Well, you mentioned you were working with other ensembles. So when I'm right, it was in Berlin, the Splitter Ensemble, and in Trondheim, the Trondheim Jazz Orchestra. So these are fixed ensembles. They are playing together for a very long time. The musicians we heard tonight, I know them everyone, and they know each other for a long time, but they are not an ensemble. So was this the idea of the Vienna project, or how do you?
Well, the ensembles are similar and different in different ways. And we were looking explicitly for a degree of variety within the ensembles to see precisely how these kinds of factors worked out. So Trondheim is not really a fixed ensemble. I mean, it's like a shell ensemble. They're a pool of musicians that work together within the ensemble for different projects, but the specific constellations are always different. And that was actually one of the mistakes I made when we were designing the first lab, is to assume that they are a band. And I thought that when we came in, it would be interesting to start questioning the unity of that band immediately. But it wasn't like that. And so I assumed a lot. And I only realized, halfway through the first lab, like, oh, shit, maybe I should have taken some time to let the band cohere. With Splitter, so that's a whole other kettle of fish. They are extremely conscious of their bandness. And that caused also problems for us, in a way, because When I say problems, by the way, I'm not saying that it was a thorn in our side or anything like that. What I meant is it provides us, stuff to work through. So with Splitter, I knew that they're a band and that they have this very strong identity as Splitter and being members of Splitter. But I also know them as individuals, and I've played with many of them over long periods of time, for a decade or more. And so I thought that when I came to them with this project, and when I would propose things and also play with them as part of this lab, that there would be a degree of familiarity which did not materialize. Because although I know these people as individuals, and we're friends actually, the strength of that band bond was extremely hard for an outsider to deal with. So, Klingt, as you said, is sort of somewhere in between, but also different, because they know each other very well, and they play in different constellations, and I don't really want to speak for them, but maybe someone in the band can talk about what makes your ensemble unique with respect to our project.
There was a band 10, 12 years ago. It was called the Klingt Orchestra, and it was basically this lineup minus Mats Brandelmeier plus some others. So it was a very similar group of people, but very different music, because it was the explicit goal not to improvise, but to rather play pieces, band pieces in a way. So when Christopher originally asked me if the Klingt Orchestra wants to join, I said, yeah, I'm happy to, but we are not an improvising orchestra. And he said yes, and then it took a long while and some back and forth until we realized, or I realized, that this is a project where the original band concept and band name doesn't fit. And then we decided to use a different name for the same group of people, more or less. And it was during COVID pandemic, and we were all sitting at home. And there was a project which was started by some German radio people, which brought together musicians from, I think, 10 countries or something. And it was called the Kuch Collective. And that's where the collective thing came in. We didn't know each other before at all in this group, except for everybody knew the radio people and I knew Billy, but that was about it. And we played together every Thursday from, I think it was 7 to 9 or something, online without seeing each other. And the idea of this collective was a very strange way to improvise, because you would only get the result of the improvisation via MP3 stream like 30 seconds later or something. So it was all very abstract, and still it created some really great music, I think. And so when we decided to change the name of Klingt Orchestra for this lab, and bring it more or closer to the concepts of improvisation, Billy came up with the idea, let's call it collective, and then Angélica was like, yeah, collective, I want a collective. And then it was quickly clear we are the Klingt Collective, not the Klingt Orchestra anymore. And so, yes, we are a band that has never played in this constellation before together, but we are a band where people have been cooking, demonstrating, doing holidays, and playing in small constellations since about 30 years. So we are a band in a way. Any answer is valid.
And is it right you're going to continue this work in the project now?
Yes, the plan is that the whole project goes over 4 years. And we will meet as Klingt Collective, the Norwegian, the Trondheim Orchestra, and we will meet the Splitter Orchestra, and the Splitter Orchestra will meet the Trondheim Orchestra, and we will all meet together for a huge group. So there will be all kinds of labs in the next 3 years going on.
Thank you.
Just to mention that Klingt Collective and Splitter Orchestra can be heard in Wien Modern 2003.
Yeah, I wanted to ask, in this kind of music, like there is not like one tone that's good, like there's so much good. And I was thinking about how much is skill and how much is letting go. And does your skill make it even more difficult to let go? Yeah, that's my question.
Who wants to answer?
The skill is to let go.
Okay.
True.
So could children like play with you then, like because they don't have skill at all?
No. I think the skill makes like the communication flows in a free way. There's a lot. Skill means respect and trust and your own. We all know our own. Each of us has our own palette of languages. There are many languages happening at the same time. So the skill is to let go in a way of, with all these things I said before. Yeah,
and
that's the main skill for improvisation for us, I think. Yeah.
And the degree of letting go depends on how much there is to let go of.
Which is very personal.
I always like to compare it to, Angélica already said language, to a podium, how do you say, panel discussion, just like here, basically. Everybody knows, everybody has an opinion, everybody has some basic ideas of when it's okay to talk and when it's better to wait and let the others talk. And apart from that, you just say your opinion and you try to react to what the others say. So there's all this back and forth going on. And it's a discussion. Yeah. Often with more things at the same time than in spoken language.
Yeah, I see similarities to freestyle rap. Like it's so similar. You listen to the others and then, yeah.
Can I ask a question? Or, I don't want to exaggerate as a moderator. I'm supposed to be moderating. But I went to see one rehearsal, and my impression was that you were like trying to achieve a common sound. So one sound that where all of you take part in. First, was that the right impression I had?
Yeah, that was what we tried to do at this point.
Mm-hmm. The word rehearsal is a bit misleading because it was part of the lab, and we were trying to I think when you came, Oliver was proposing a piece where we were playing sheets of paper arranged, and we would interpret these pieces of paper in different ways, while with our musical language. But we decided that the lab music and the concert are two different things. And so the lab was not the rehearsal for the concert, but the concert was an improvised concert with very rough rules, but basically free more or less. And of course, it includes the experiences that we have from the lab, but it also includes any other experience that we ever had. So, that's what just wanted to say this about the term rehearsal.
I would call it test scenario. We were having I would say it was certain test scenarios that we were exposed to, or that we exposed us to with the guidance, under the guidance of Christopher, Josh and Caroline. But it's, we never thought this to be rehearsals. We also never thought this to be pieces and finished music. Actually, this is also a type of music that's better to not rehearse in order to be fresh. That's the most important thing, I think, in this type of music.
But don't hand out too many microphones at the same time, otherwise we will have question duets. I think that was the first one, as far as I have seen it. But still, for the second part of my question, how much does this common sound play a role? I mean, how much do you have the goal of achieve one common thing as opposed to 9 solos, for instance? How much is this common sound concept important?
I think it's easier to achieve a common sound, if that's the goal, in different ways, in more predefined ways, in more composed, so to say, ways. In our case, the common sound is an emergent result of what each of us tries to communicate and how each of us tries to react to the whole situation. But it's not that we are all trying to get to the same point at the same time, I would say.
So, one question, and then afterwards another question.
So first, thank you for your concert. Yeah. So the first question I would have is about the relation of the ethical with music here. Because on one side, it was very interesting for me to see really the ethics in the way you are playing and listening. So there was a big game of being active and really strong periods of people, especially you also, who were just sitting there and listening to the others and responding in that way. So this was a very visual way for me of seeing a kind of ethics in the music. What was different for me was this ethics was very much a group ethics, I would say. Yeah, so it was really ethics between you, between your collective in a certain way. So I was not sure which place I, as an audience, to play in this relation of ethics and music in this special way of doing it. Because I have very strong ethical feeling of what you are doing among you, but I was not sure where the third, because in many ethics the third, the outside, is a very important perspective. So is not the danger that this becomes a clan ethics, yeah, from a philosophical point, that people are feeling good together, but there is no outside, like Levinas would say, there is no third eye, which is outside looking on them? Or how do you see this?
Great question, Anna Böhler. There are a bunch of third eyes. They're just not here yet. This is the first phase of the project, all right? So in the first year, we meet each ensemble individually. We get to know each other. We learn what their working cultures are. We do our best to establish some degree of trust with them. And then it gets messy. Next year, we will bring the ensembles together in pairs, right? And so it's not only about the ensemble relating to us or relating to each other, but they're also relating to another ensemble. And they're relating to a history of working with us and a history of working with them. So I think there's constantly these kind of externalities at work. As the project goes on, you become more conscious of them. And at the end, it's going to be, I have no idea how this is going to work. Bringing 3 improvising ensembles together. I don't know if it will work. It could be a total circus and everyone comes out unsatisfied. I don't know. But yeah, so the third order, the fourth order, they come.
In a way, Arno, I think the fact that we're a team of 3 researchers and performers ourselves, we also play a part because we bring very different ways of paying attention and questioning with us. But also the fact that the audience has there's a very clear reason why we want concerts as part of every stage of the project, right? Because the audience creates a certain environment of legitimation right? How does the audience respond to a concert? And my dream, my hope, if I manage to find the funds, is towards the end of the concert, is also to bring in groups from very, very different backgrounds to come and give critical feedback on the work. And this is a way of saying, okay, how do you deal with difference of different degrees, and radical alterity, if we're thinking about Levinas, would be the way of, like, at what point would the difference be so much that there is no way of communicating, and what would that teach us from an ethical point of view of where the limits of our understandability, of our relationality is. And if you want to help us thinking about that.
Angélica, you wanted to say something?
I'm not a theorist, but if I understood, the third will be like there is this one-two communication between us on stage. I mean, there was a communication between us as ensemble with our three colleagues, but you're talking about the third ethic, or the third point will be the public, which is very beautiful for me, like to think now about this. I never thought in this way how it would be the ethic. I think in the way we're presenting music, we are communicating what we know at the same time, that we're presenting something. This was for us very important, this concert today, that's why we really needed to separate it from the research work, to be able, maybe, I say it just maybe in name of my colleagues, to be able to have this communication with the public. If we would have been too busy with the research and with the theoretical part, for us would be impossible. I mean, for me, let's say, I say for me, if somebody wants to agree, for me it would be impossible to have a communication as well with the public. To have a communication in an ensemble with the public is a very complex thing, but we are building a house, let's say, this is the piece we do, like in a certain amount of time, and this house should be a place to habit, that you could all probably habit in a certain moment, not all the time. Sometimes the doors are closed, sometimes some windows are open, sometimes some windows appear to you, or sometimes you want to, it's a bit the position of a voyeur, you know, sometimes, oh, you see light, you see dark, you see, and this is, for me, more or less, this communication, which could be in improvisation especially. We are building this messy house in a moment, and then at the end of the concert, the house will hopefully collapse.
I have a short follow-up. Do you have the impression the research has ended?
No, the research is not ended, and when we still think about it, we will probably think a long time about it, but the communication with you had to end at the moment we come on stage. Yeah, because it's too much. It's not possible to build this messy building.
Josh wants to say something.
I think that's a really beautiful metaphor, actually, that image of the house. I think one of the things I really enjoy about working with improvised music, especially experimental music, which is not my scene, it's not where I come from, is it makes a lot of these things much more visible. So speaking to an audience, you know, in a classical concert, you know, we've all, if you've grown up in a European context, or pretty much anywhere now, because of the, you know, the spread or the push of culture, certain things like the scales, the rhythms of pop music, you know, these make sense automatically because we've absorbed them, we've been enculturated into them from, you know, from before we could speak almost. So these sounds don't necessarily require effort to make sense. Doesn't mean they're not beautiful, doesn't mean they're not worth going to enjoy, but in a certain sense they're easier for people. That's why, you know, the Philharmonic sells out every year. And in Echo Realm, you know, it's a really small subculture. But what's really interesting, I think, is it really becomes like learning a language. I keep coming back to this idea of language because as an audience member coming to music like this, you need to make an effort. Like these guys play so well because they've learned each other's language over decades, and when you spend some time with them, even spending just a week with them, you really start to, understand how they respond to each other, what they're listening to. But as an audience, especially as a first-time audience member, it can be difficult because it's like going to a conference, a speech in another language, and maybe you understand this or that, but otherwise your head gets full and you leave. So the ethical place of the audience is a really interesting question, because there's that responsibility on the part of the audience to make that effort to come forward, but I suppose the musicians as well, to greater or lesser degrees, will feel a responsibility to let that audience in, to switch on the lights in their house, and how welcoming they are. This is a choice again, and it becomes a choice in a way that it's not perhaps a choice in a more conventional ensemble. It's a really interesting, I guess, ethical.
Active listening you need in all cases. It's not only with improvised music, with contemporary music, also with Beethoven you have done active listening. Only difference is that certain musics are easier on the easy scale to perceive. I mean, it's easier to listen to the cliches or the classical models of harmonics, melodics, rhythm. It's easier listening on the superficial level, but if you want to get deep into it, you need to listen actively. So I don't see a difference between improvised music, contemporary written music. If you listen to Emma on Sunday, it was such an intense evening, and you need to listen active. If you don't pay attention, you lose it.
Absolutely.
So that's my point. I mean, I wouldn't make from a musical practice a difference in the way you listen. Listening, you need always to be active. Otherwise, it's superficial stuff.
Sure. Yeah. Don't misunderstand me. Yeah.
So it's I listen. If I listen active. Otherwise, I don't listen.
Yeah. Don't misunderstand me, but where I talk about, I mean, you mentioned yourself, some things are easier and some things are harder because one has that kind of cultural background. But again, there's a skill. There's a skill to listening well to somebody speaking. There's a skill to going deeper. These are not things which are just natural out there in the environment. Some things we take in without trying because we spend a long time being enculturated. Some things we make the active effort to learn that culture. And this goes right across the board. I completely agree with you there.
I just guess with the non-idiomatic musics, so the more abstract musics, the requirement of active listening is much more needed than in music which can be also listened to superficially.
100%.
But it just gives another experience if you listen active, and that also relates to the role of the audience in such a kind of music situation, because when you are together in the same space, then there's something happening which I can't really grasp what it is, but there is something happening between the performers and the audiences. There is not really a clear communication in words or something like that, but it's a kind of, I don't know what it is. I don't have a word for it, but it's a difference if you are in an empty room or in your studio and make a stream concert, or if you are in presence of somebody, or many bodies.
For sure, yeah. That's what keeps us coming back.
Next question.
Okay. I have two questions. My first question is to the researchers. Why did
Please, the microphone closer to them.
My first question is to the researchers. Why did you choose 3 big ensembles? Because if I'm interested in ethics in music, I could also do it with little ensembles, with trios and quartets and quintets, I don't know. But why do you need these big ensembles to do this research?
Great question. You're right. One could do this with any size ensemble. One doesn't even necessarily have to do this kind of project with musicians. One could do it with other art forms. One could do it with office workers. One could do it with athletes. But we've chosen to do it in music, both for personal reasons and for methodical reasons. So the personal reason has to do with my background. I'm a trained composer and a bass player, and I've been making experimental music most of my life. And I've worked in lots of different contexts, playing other people's music, playing my own music, improvising with smaller groups, composing for chamber music ensembles or making radio plays. So I'm pretty ecumenical when it comes to formats or media. But one medium, if you want to call it that I never liked is large improvising ensembles. And a few years ago, I asked myself, well, why? And I think a lot of people in this audience probably have had the experience of listening to large improvising ensembles that it's just very easy for this format to become a mess because it's hard for people to listen to each other. And the larger the group gets, the harder it gets. So composers or people in these ensembles that want to approach this problem, they come up with different solutions. There's, some people will wave their arms in front of the orchestra, and the orchestra will follow them as a conductor. Some people will use graphic scores. Some people will use timelines. Some people will, provide a tune or a little fragment of music that the orchestra can work with. There's a billion different ways of dealing with that. But to me, many of them are unsatisfactory because it doesn't address this central problem about how the individuals and the subgroups within the ensemble are listening to each other. And so if you look at that carefully, you realize, well, it's not just an aesthetic problem, it's actually an ethical problem. And what I've been working on for the last, 5 or 6 years, also in the project that came before, the musical ethics labs, is kind of tweaking social constellations in order to make these problems more visible and allow musicians to work with it. And when I was presented with the opportunity to go more deeply into this with the help of not only my own background as a musician, but the perspective of people from other fields, which was offered to me by Denise Peters, who directs a doctoral school for artistic research in Graz, and invited me to submit a grant proposal, which is when I invited Josh and Caroline to join the project a few years ago. I thought, well, you know what, this has to be looked at more systematically somehow. And what the large ensembles offer is a very high degree of complexity and richness in which to look at how all these things relate. Scalability, habits, senses of self and other, all of these very deep ethical phenomena that you can get into in many different contexts within the ensembles that maybe it wouldn't be so easy to do if you're looking at groups of 4 to 5 people, or if you're looking at athletes or office workers. Does that make sense?
Okay, yes, a little bit. So you are looking for complexity.
Well, we invite complexity in.
Yeah.
No, let's put it that way.
Okay.
Didn't you have another question? Later. Okay. Yeah?
For me, as a part of the audience, the outcome is the most important thing. So when I listen to a very big ensemble improvising, I see the problems, the troubles, as today. The thing is not as good working as with small ensembles, because the interaction is much better in small ensembles than in big ones. So I think small ensembles will give a better outcome in the musical experience.
I was talking about this with a sir who we were talking outside while smoking, and he wanted to know why as well these big ensembles and and I have been thinking this. I think we all, while we accept and while we did got this idea at the very beginning, 10 years ago, 12 years ago, is because the big sound is very nice. It's very nice to have a big magma of craziness, and it's indeed very difficult to control, but I think in a certain moment it's not anymore about interaction, it's about being humble and leaving these layers of sound. It's really about sound. It's not about, like I was listening before coming here to be, while I was cooking, a very nice trio three guys playing fantastic, Anthony Patera, Shane Bastard. I was really, and you can hear how it's very clear how they're reacting to each other, and it's really like almost like a ping pong of tennis, you know, like, oh wow, cool, that goes, and create new. And in this is much more heavy. It's like a big dinosaur moving, and in this slowness we have to find each other, and it's really about this. Yeah, it's an ideal of a special sound which is not possible anywhere else, like not with an orchestra, because an orchestra you have a very defined as well connection to the instrumentalist you're singing. You see this person direct conducting, and in this is really like about, yeah, magma, cosmos, like could be super magic. It's very difficult, but if it works, I think it's like the ecstasies, yeah.
Question is totally righteous if we talk about, oh yeah, here's a microphone, thank you. No, Elisabeth's question is totally, I think it's totally right to ask that question, because all these practices in large and all kind of sizes of groups making music in real time, so improvising, is very interesting to explore. And I think as the question is insofar interesting as this is a research project, right? It's a research project. So you could research how it works in all types of formats.
Yeah, but it was not a research concert. It was just a concert.
Sorry? It was?
It's a research project that we are part of. And the two concerts were set up as part of the research.
No, this is totally clear, but I mean, this runs over.
But this was not a research concert. It was just a concert of our group.
No, this is clear, but the project is no, this is totally clear. But the whole project runs across 4 years, right?
4 years, yeah.
And so, as far as I understood, it's majorly around these 3 orchestras, right?
Yes.
So. Is that what I understood? I'm not sure. So it could be also
3 big ensembles and 4 years.
Mm-hmm.
But we printed the number of involved musicians in the program. So anybody who wants to complain that it was not a trio should read probably the program. Hans?
I am, and I was surprised that a researcher is an active part of the collective. A researcher there who played not with this group in the time before, and I think that's a problem. Is it no problem for the researcher, or is it a problem for the collective?
It's a problem for everybody.
Pardon?
Pardon?
Is it a problem for the researcher or for the team, or perhaps it's a problem for the collective?
Yeah, it's a problem for everybody. I think it's,
that's okay.
Yeah, as
for
I said,
a research project, it's not okay. I think that the researcher is part of the active musicians.
Are you a musicologist?
Yes.
Okay.
Well, let me say something.
Yeah.
In ethnology, it's perfectly normal. There you have a method called teilnehmende Beobachtung. Not 100% sure what it's called in English, but it's really part of the methods. So that's not something that has been invented for this week, just to mention that. In musicology, depends, but in ethnomusicology, it exists as well.
Can I add to that? So it's a question that plagues the academic world, because you have many disciplines. For example, as Bernhard mentioned, in, let's say, the anthropological sciences, whether it's ethnomusicology or anthropology or ethnology, and feminism, right? You have the sense that no knowledge can in any way be separated from a person's personal position and experience. So the whole point of participant observation as
Teilnehmende Beobachtung.
Participant observation is the fact that in order to learn, you need to be part of something. However, there are a number of sociologists and sociologists of science that look at how, in fact, there is a very clear discourse in the natural sciences, right? That you say, in order to be able to understand something, you have to be so-called objective, distanced. And this creates certain effects in the world. So it doesn't mean that it's a myth or it doesn't exist. It exists, but it creates a different sort of way of knowing. And what we are specifically looking at is, okay, one, we come from a humanities background where we acknowledge that our presence, no matter how minuscule, is an intervention of some sort. Especially as an anthropologist, I know from experience, the minute you ask a question, you've changed something. So either we ignore it and we pretend that we're not making a difference, or else we embrace it. And we say, here are my cards, they're all on the table, please critique us back, so that this can be a very fair exchange and that the knowledge production becomes collaborative. And that's my response, right? And it is a very feminist argument that our bodies, our presences are part of research, of knowledge making.
But I can assure you it caused a lot of discussions.
Yes, may I ask? My question is on the other side of this perspective. What is the impact of the researchers' work on the music and the behavior of the musicians?
I think as a musician, or I cannot speak for everyone, but for myself, I can say maybe the biggest part of the work in making music is observing yourself. It doesn't make such a big difference for me if there is another one joining me doing that. But on the other hand, I have to say that we did have the situation that one of our group and all of a sudden changed place and said, I cannot play with these guys looking at me all the time. So, I mean, there is a lot of possible approaches to that.
Are there any more questions?
Just a short one, in a way related to these questions. So you said you didn't want to have a research outcome concert, but it's a concert as you play it as a collective. Do you think, or can you figure out if the lab you had, if it somehow changed something, or if it influenced you, if it had some kind of impact, or is it hard to say that? Because I mean, you knew how to improvise together. So it's not that you felt like we need to learn tools.
I would simply say it's one of many, many influences. It's not that we rehearsed or learned or practiced for the concert in the lab, but of course every one of us had the opportunity to think about their own music and the others in the group and the whole setting and everything. So of course the last week has changed every one of us and has changed the outcome of the concert, but many other musical experiences before that have done so as well.
Yeah, I also have to say I'm not so sure that we played better than we would have without any lab. Could be, could not be. Yeah, we don't know that. And
There's a reason, because it's a thing which develops over a long time. It's not. I mean,
we don't need to rehearse, and if you do something like every day for like 7-8 days in a row when it comes to improvised music, might be that there's also a couple of people who are less inspired than it would have been like 10 days ago. Absolutely. So I also, at least for me, we didn't agree to this because we think this can enhance our improvisation skill or our artistic enlightenment or something. We also at least didn't agree to this in order to be observed or documented. Yeah, I would have, or what I'm interested in is learning a little about the disciplines of the trio, so to say, and be a little more exposed to their particular scientific research interests. Yeah. I think we do reflect about art every day, but if you do this sort of in an organized group way, I don't think that's like the most inspiring thing to do. We want, anyway.
I think this point what you make is it's pointing to actually to the ethics, because ethics of improvisation is the practice that in a situation playing together, creating the music in the moment, requires that you adapt to each moment. You have to find your way how to adapt in each moment, and that requires to listen to your own and to the collective progress, or how can I say? And so it's so that for me this is a center part of the ethics of improvisation for a society model also. I mean, for me, basically, improvisation could be an ethical model for the society regarding the others accordingly, which unfortunately in a capitalist society is not happening.
Yeah, it's a luxury to be with these nice people one whole week, or I don't know, more than 1 week, 10 days, reflecting about things. So this, even if it was not always easy, and we had a lot of confusion because we felt often a bit stressed by the situation, some less, and whatever. But for me, I can say, like, I discovered through this stress situation, like, I don't know, if you land in a lonely island somewhere, then you learn the people in a different way, you know? And I learned all my colleagues, other facets of which influence basically, yes, the way I was playing today, I think, as well. Not only, it's not the only influence, as Dieter said, it's everything, because we deal with life, and with this Straßenbahn, when I saw a woman screaming today, for example, this influenced my playing when I'm improvising, for sure. But yeah, all this history, and I really have the feeling like I'm really happy that it goes on, like we will do more things together. So yeah, it's with Sikan, how you say, like, it will come down, and we will, digest this thing, and yeah, something will be special, I think.
Yeah,
it's a bit of a pity that Martin gave it away, but that actually we are observing the researchers.
We even took photos of us.
I was observing a lot as well. I was like, oh, what are they saying, what they want, yeah, all the time. Yeah.
I also, Thomas, have to slightly disagree with improvised music or whatever, being like sort of a role model for like society questions. I'm actually not looking for that or interested in that in the arts. I think it's the nice thing about the arts is that you can be confronted with rather ugly themes and ideas, and even ways to treat each other. And this has could in many instances have a very interesting artistic outcome. Yeah, I don't think it's. Art is interesting when it's about being nice and just being polite and being, as opposed to real life, where very much endorse those virtues. Yeah, but I think things often get interesting when the politeness is, or when there's also some certain type of disrespectfulness allowed when it comes to the arts. Yeah, and that's also is sometimes, at least in my personal interest, the more interesting outcomes of things that are not like just nice and democratic and respectful and all these wonderful terms that I don't look for when I'm playing.
Katharina.
Yeah.
Sorry, Thomas, ich muss dich mal unterbrechen eben. Du kommst schon noch dran.
No, it's a very practical question. As far as I realized, there was a computer, and I guess you had a stopwatch there. And my question is that when I heard the beginning of the concert, I thought, did you have the agreement to play the whole group in a very loud way? Or did you have an agreement about the form? Because this is, of course, a big question of the ethics of improvisation. How much have you played really in a very free way, or were there certain agreements of reactions of a formal, of the length of the concert? Yeah, that's it.
We had a clear structure, but very wide. We were really, I mean, in our group was as well, there's some people we were thinking we can play, 4 hours completely free. And there was the other, we had actually, quite some different opinions how to deal with such a concert. So the compromise was this structure, which was quite open. But even for me, like this structure was like we had some meeting points and some kind of things what we do, very, very open. But this beginning was very special because we didn't agree to play loud. So, and everybody was like, it was very nice. Yeah, but it was only a time schedule, more or less.
Okay. No, because improvisation is such a complex thing. And also dealing with time, and it's also as a composer, we are thinking a lot about these things. And so I would like to know if this project is really on free improvisation or also on structured improvisation.
Oh, both. Yeah.
We were discussing like a whole week whether the concert will be either of those.
I think. This almost reflects back a bit on the previous question, and the gentleman mentioned, improvisation as a model for society. It's something which we hear about a lot. And for me, I think, I don't see it as like a guiding model. As I said at the start, I don't think there is something necessarily virtuous in an improvisation in and of itself. But I think that improvisation is actually something that we do in everyday life, regardless of whether we try to or not. And what's kind of interesting, I think, is that tension, that there are these structures in our life, these structures which are material, which are social, which we bump up against, and that we have to negotiate our way through. And it's this sense of having a will, of having desires, of having agreements, and then having them not turn out as we plan, but we still negotiate ways to go forward, which aren't always necessarily specific rational decisions, but that all the rationality is embedded in those structures which are there and which limit our options but also open them up. And I think this way of looking at what ethics and freedom is much more interesting than saying, okay, improvisation is free because we learn how to work together nicely. I think that doesn't happen in life or in music, but the way that we try to make it happen, that's really where the interesting ethical stuff starts to happen.
Just to add a tiny weeny bit to what just to reply a little bit to what Josh was saying, there are theories of structuration, right, where this opposition between freedom and structure are obviated, that the difference has been dissolved. Because the notion of improvisation as opposed to structure is itself a culturally and historically specific idea, right? And what we are looking at is, one, how is that experienced by people who are expert improvisers, right? So a very grounded theory approach, like, okay, you are training specifically to be an improviser, living specifically to be an improviser, and how does that play out within the context of these specific historical and cultural understandings of what improvisation is. But also, we bring these theoretical material to the group and say, and actually, basically, we're challenging each other all the time. At what point does freedom as a word even make sense? What is, Chris has this really interesting term which he calls bandwidth of choice, right? So at some point, there is like limits to how much you can choose. And I've been thinking about this in relation to very, very structured theatrical pieces where you can be, even your breaths or where your eyes move are completely structured. But within that, it almost feels like a refraction, right? That no matter how small you get, the scale opens up, right? So wherever I look, there's improvisation in the sense that no matter how structured it is, your options continuously branch out. And I'd be very curious to know I'm figuring there are quite a few musicians in the audience, like your own experiences of this bandwidth of choice. Like if your bandwidth of choice is really tiny, does it actually mean it's tiny or just opens up on a different scale, you know?
Okay. Julia?
Yes, I was thinking before, but I will now say something about what you said, that my experience, I'm a painter, and I know about structures and spontaneity, and the thing is that you fall over patterns, and our historical patterns are like in Vienna, in Austria, Mozart and so on, the classic music and even the older ones, make some effort on me, which makes me a little bit different from what I experience daily life. So what you all are about is how to investigate the situation we live now through in a very personal way, but we know that we live in a different collective. And if I think in a different collective like than in centuries ago. And what I really enjoy is listening to you, how you reflect through music and your interaction in different individualities, how you manage to communicate in music. And that's what was happening for me. So I think that's perfect.
Thanks.
Okay.
Okay, nochmal das Mikro hochgeben bitte, da wo es gerade war. Thank you.
Well, I had just a very practical question. When you observe, what actually do you observe? So I guess it's the relations when which persons refer to each other or connect to each other. And I guess you, maybe after the rehearsals, you ask the musicians what they thought about playing or how they feel afterwards or whatever. But I would be interested in that.
Because we are a multidisciplinary team, we pay attention very differently. And yes, excuse me, I'll pass on to Josh as well and to Chris. But something that I've been like playing with is listening through different modes of practice. So, for example, my anthropological background would teach me to follow who is responding to whom, what are, for example, very classical forms of like leadership or charisma, right? So I'll be paying attention not only in the music, but also in the ways we have conversations around it. Like I'm really interested in what forms of authority are understood, recognized, reproduced. But those are sort of very classical anthropological questions. And in a way, I've come to find that that's not very collaborative, right? Because there's an object, I'm observing it, and I sort of draw maps and stuff like that. But what I'm very curious about is how can I pay attention to these sort of ethical questions through my theater training? And so, for example, while they were doing their work together in one part of the room, I was in another part of the room listening through improvisation improvisation of my own. And the thing that was a real striking experience was that when I'm listening through the anthropology training, I'm very specifically saying, I recognize and understand this, and I can really focus on it. It's almost like when you're reading, you have to have your vision in focus. Where I'm listening through my movement and improvisation, I'm almost like more of an open reception. I'm like, okay, give me anything, and I will be doing my best to not judge a priori, in a way. And obviously there's always judgment, but it felt like a different thing. So we're also trying to pay attention to different modes of observation, different modes of listening and giving. But Josh does different stuff, right?
Yeah, my main mode of, I guess what you'd call data collection is through interviews, through one-on-one subjective interviews. But I take a lot from the music, I guess I'm more interested in practical details. So what people are doing with their bodies, with their own attention, and how that comes out in the sound. It kind of helps me to understand what it's like to be there on the inside with them. And that goes more into an interview stage.
I'm occupying this problematic role of participant and observer in quick alternation, or maybe at the same time. And so it's maybe more complicated for me, because on the one hand, what I'm most interested in from the practitioner's point of view, or as someone who's actively proposing stuff to the musician, these interventions, these situations, is what catches. Like what arouses them somehow, and how they would propose to transform it. But it can also happen that it's rejected. And so what I have to think about is also a second order question, which is how are they relating to me as the person proposing? And that's an important part of this ethical research for me too, because there's, as I said, in my personal experience, I've related to music and power relationships in lots of different ways. I compose for other people and I expect them to do what I ask to some degree. I collaborate with people and they give me ideas and we share the compositional process. I also play people's pieces that they may have written for me or maybe not, and I try to do my best in order to bring their vision to life. So these views are all over the map in improvised music ensembles. People have, because improvising orchestras, or let's call them experimental, large improvising ensembles, they're extremely heterogeneous in terms of the background and the expectations of the individuals who are coming together. And that's one of the things that makes it super exciting. However, if you come as someone who's offering something to do, some people will reject it out of hand because they have ideas about what a composer does and they don't want to be part of it. Some people are open to it, but they have particular problems with it. Other people welcome it. And so it's not only about what happens in an aesthetic sense, in a musical sense with what I'm proposing, but it's also about the reflection on that situation. And I think that that's one of the keys, or one of the big questions I'm trying to iron out in this project is, how do you actually approach these people if you want to work with them coming from the outside? Yeah? Of course, it's different if I'm within the ensemble and I'm making the proposal. There's very different expectations about that. I've experienced it from both sides. And so, yeah, it's difficult. I have to kind of flip-flop between these two perspectives.
I have a very great respect for your research and all musicians and so on. But when we are here, we are not, we know that we didn't listen to Mozart concert or anything else. We are listening Wien Modern and contemporary music very, very much. And the problem is that I think it's called like Aufführungspraxis. I think there you have a problem that you know, or I think you have to find out how you can reach us, that we can have, I don't think that I have to go out and feel very, very comfortable. I know the music could be different, yeah? But now I have the problem that I listened to everybody, I heard everybody, but it didn't go together. And when you had a lab for 1 week, you should have you should, I think you should, what? The target to bring it to us that we have this feeling that you are a collective.
No, sorry, misunderstanding. We are not interested in your feelings.
I know it.
I'm interested in that you have feelings. I'm even very thankful that you obviously are very emotional when you hear this. So actually we, to some degree, even achieved something. Whether you like it or not, this is not an important discussion. And whether this worked or not is also your subjective perception of things. Somebody else could see it different, others could see it the same, but I'm not here to please you.
I know it.
Gut. Dann übrigt sich die Frage aber ja, oder?
Ethics are everywhere, you see.
I just think it's super fine not to like. Most of the concerts I hear, I don't necessarily like them, but I like to reflect on that. And I think that's the most important thing of especially contemporary music and the experimental music. Something which is very special for me is that it shows you that they're not, that the ways we think they should be, they're not. There are many other ways. And we take a lot of risk to try to find different ways. It's not, for us, it's not, you have to be very, you have to have a lot of guts to do some things we do sometimes, to look for other ways. And sometimes it goes wrong, sometimes some people like it, some people not, but we're really not, we throw ourselves in the hole without paraglide. Yeah, and that's, we take that risk that people don't like it, but we love that. So, and I think it's very good not to like it and to be critical. So, and to like it is even better.
I think at the heart of your question, really, underneath there, what I find really interesting is that question, like, what is art for? And we answer that in very different ways. Some people would say art is not for anything, and I think the way that I've been learning to think about it actually is that the art doesn't stop. It's not self-contained. There's an element of self-contained about it, which makes it a thing that we can talk about, but actually the conversation that goes before and that goes after, the festival itself, is cultural context. Like when I think about art and I think the practice of art and philosophy and research and science, I've started to think about this as like, this is us working it all out. Like us as in us in the most inclusive term of that. And when I think about working it all out, it's at the heart of the ethical question, like what is it to live a human life? And we come here and we have an experience and maybe it doesn't make sense to us now. And in 5 years we think back to it and we say, man, I saw that terrible concert. You know, but in those intervening 5 years, it starts to mean different things. And that filters through our conversations, which we have with our friends, with our families, with our strangers. And for me, that's what art is for. And it goes much further away from the moment of whether something works or not in a particular situation.
Is there anybody who wants to get rid of a last question? Otherwise I would say, Huh? You have a last question.
I have a last question. Can we still drink wine after this?
I'm so sorry, the bar has sneaked away. But in the neighborhood there are a couple of drinks.
I think the question of the need for consensus is very important. And I just want to throw as a last thing for myself on the table that it's actually much easier to agree than to stand a variety of opinions.
So, we've been talking for way over an hour. I was thinking about 30 minutes, but well, thank you so much for all the questions and feedback and answers and statements and sharing experiences from this special week and well, to be continued tomorrow and then a year later with Splitter Orchestra to make it even more complex.
Can I give a little plug that if you haven't heard enough of people talking, then tomorrow at 6 o'clock before the concert, we're going to have a round table with 2 guest speakers, Professor Denise Peters from the Kunstuniversität Graz and Professor Mark Wheeler from University of Stirling. So please, if you have the time, come along and it'll be an interesting discussion. It'll only be 1 hour.
Thank you very much.